Welcome. This is a key to front-end development. My name is Carlos Sanchez and you can find me at github.com as Kotaro44 and check out my portfolio at kotaro44.github.com. In this video, we will talk about JavaScript frameworks, but first let me introduce myself a bit. I am from Honduras and I have several years working as a full-stack engineer. That means I had developed video games, a web-based Tetris, to more professional web applications like eBay's SAP HANA demo and dashboard for other companies' projects. As a full-stack engineer, I had worked in projects from designing the database and developing independent programs that read and write on them to send emails to final users, and also I develop APIs that are consumed by web applications, providing authentication and access to the data to be finally used by the end users. So, the development of these web applications is what are we going to talk about in this video. Imagine that you got an idea about doing an application of something like an online supermarket, that you can check the products and see information about the nutrition facts before you buy. We could call it Farm at Home. So your backend engineers develop an API that reads information from a database and provides a list of products with the capability of getting detailed information of a specific products. So we are already halfway done. But here is where it enters a big debate in the front-end community. We know a web application will use mostly HTML5 and CSS3 for the cool animations, but the logic and all the interaction will be done in JavaScript. Sure, there are other languages out there like PHP or Ruby, but that's a topic for another video. JavaScript is the language that is already built up in the browsers, and to develop scalable and maintainable web applications, developers bring up JavaScript frameworks that can help us to organize our code and follow good architectural design practices, like MVC or other patterns. And hell, there are so many JavaScript frameworks and web technologies that we don't know which one to choose. However, that doesn't mean that the frameworks are bad and should be avoided. Up to this time, the most popular frameworks are React, Angular, and Vue.js. And by some reason, some people still prefer to use an older version of Angular that they call AngularJS. But let's go back to the main problem. How to choose our JavaScript framework? Is the chosen framework good enough? Will it help me to code faster? Will it make my life easier? Will it make anyone able to help me add new features to my app? Well, to answer those questions, let's go back to our supermarket app. Before choosing the framework, we need to think about how our app will look like and how it will behave. So let's try to design something. Regardless of the framework, our application should have some components like a header, a content, and a footer. Based on the API result, our application will mainly consist of two views, one for listing all the products and another one to show the detail of a specific product. These can be two independent components that can be rendered into the content depending if the user provided an ID or not in the URL. The product detail only needs to show all the information of products such as the name, image, description, nutrition facts, and a price. But the product list needs to show several products at a time, so we may need another component like a product card that could be repeated several times inside the product list. And the product list should allow us to filter the products by name. That means that the product card should only show the name, an image, and the price of the product. Since the product detail is already an independent component, the product card could have an extra functionality that once clicked, instead of going directly to the product detail, it could just show the product detail on a model provided by the product list. But that makes the routing a little bit useless. So we can add a final functionality to product detail showing the user to copy the URL of the product detail into the clipboard, allowing users to share products easily. Finally, we may need to have some constants that could define which currency we should show through the app. So we can add a standalone component constants, and of course the architecture can be complete without a standalone component that provides the data and connection to the API. This sounds pretty good for an app. Of course, there's still some functionalities that can be removed, but we are also trying to cover most common and useful functionalities on the web application. So let's go back to the main problem. If I want to develop this application, which framework should I use? About animation or responsive design, this shouldn't be included in our choice since this can be done with pure CSS. The only thing we care about the design is that the framework will allow us to give classes to any HTML tag we want. So we just need to care about if the framework supports features like the routing, components, services that could be used through the components, and AJAX requests, of course. But when you start searching on the internet about which one you can use, you will find yourself trapped on a war where people are fighting to defend which is the best framework. That even created some people saying that instead of just choosing your flavor between chocolate and rum raisin, they stay only with the simple and plain vanilla JS, since it's already powerful enough for you to develop complete web applications and the coding style is totally up to you. But we still prefer to use a framework to help developers follow a similar pattern. And for our supermarket case, most JS framework supports our required features. So which framework you choose to develop this app doesn't matter at all. Some people choose the framework based on performance, but measure the performance on each framework is quite a complicated task. And in the end, most frameworks are fast enough, letting the performance issue to your CodeLogic browser or devices. In order to test the frameworks, I created a website farm at home that we just designed using the three most popular frameworks and even the old AngularJS that we were just talking about. As you can see on the screen, we have four tabs representing each of the four frameworks that we use. So here we have the Vue.js version, the AngularJS version, and the Angular version. So if we go back to the React version and we try the filter, we can try to search for banana or bacon and it will appear there, or also for onions. So we can click on the apples and we can see that there will be like a loading of the image and the details, and the model, we can close the model, and we can also try it on our Vue version just to click the bananas, and we see that we have exactly the same loading with the details. If we click on get a shareable link, we can see that it was copied to the clipboard, a URL showing the detail of the bananas. You can see that all the detail appears here, and we can go to the AngularJS version just to see that the filter is also working here. And we can also click on the details for the broccoli. We can go to the Angular version and we can try the responsive design by reducing the size of the window. So we can see that it adapts a shape for a mobile phone. If we click on the model, you will see that the model was also adjusted for the bananas. And we can see that the design is the same on every single version. That's pretty good for the UI. But what about the code? If we see here, we have open four versions of the router part. Basically, the router should just tell you, like, if you have this path, you should go to this component. And if you have this other path, you should go to this other component. So right now here, we are checking for the Angular version of the router. So we can see here that we have for the route list, we are just loading the product list component. And by the list with the ID of the product, then we show the product detail component. For any other path, we are just redirecting to list. So for the Vue.js version, we have exactly the same thing. We have two paths and a default path. For the AngularJS version, actually we can tell this is the smallest one, but it also has exactly the same information. The path for list and the path for list with the product ID. And the React version is the one that is a little bit more interesting because it's the one that contains the HTML together with the JavaScript. But in the end, you can also tell the path basically is here for the list and for the product. Now let's compare the HTML of each component. So in this case, we are using the product card component and we are comparing like at the version of each framework that we can see here. So as we can tell, the Angular version and the AngularJS version is pretty much similar. The only thing that changes here is a little bit the syntax about the ngIf, as here it has a dash on the AngularJS version, but it's pretty much the same structure as we had before. So for the Vue.js version, actually we can tell it's quite similar to the one on the Angular version, but the difference that this one is inside a template tag. And also, of course, instead of using ngIf, we use vif for Vue.js. Also, we can tell that the script part is included in the same file, but we are going to talk about this a little bit later. And we can see that for the React version, actually is like the most interesting one because everything is also in the same file, but we can see how the JavaScript and the HTML are mixed together. For the logic part of the component here, we have the Angular version, but we can see that this is written on TypeScript instead of JavaScript. So we are defining two properties here, the product and the click, that has to be passed by a parent component. So if we check the AngularJS version, we will find that also the two properties, but this file is actually written in JavaScript. So for the Vue.js version, as you remember, the script is also included in the same file as a template file, but they are just in a separated tag. But also we can find the two properties here, the product and the click. So for the React version, we can see that the HTML and the JavaScript are actually combining to the same file. but we can still find that the product property is being used inside a code and the on-click as well. So as you can see from the code, all frameworks will help you to develop your app quickly in a pretty organized way. However, we cannot say which framework is better than the other. It's a matter of taste. So you should just choose the framework that will make you feel more comfortable, since in the end all of them have their pros and cons. For instance, in React, while you are mixing your JS logic with your Vue logic, it's pretty easy to finish having an spaghetti code that nobody would like to maintain. The other three frameworks prevent this by forcing you to have the logic and the view separated, but that doesn't mean that they are perfect. Angular forces you to set a type to every variable using TypeScript that many developers could feel annoying, and also is the one who install much more dependencies, making it slower to run the apps locally on your machine. Vue.js has still made you write a longer code for things that you could do in a couple of lines in AngularJS, but AngularJS also introduces so many concepts that makes it feel so complicated for beginners. In the end, we can say it again. Which framework you choose depends on you, but the key to develop a good web application is designing your application from the beginning the best that you can, so it can be clear how many components your code will have regardless of the framework that you choose. So thank you for watching, and feel free to contact me if you have any question or you want to know a little bit more about front-end development.